So I'm so excited today that we're here with my friend Scott Andrews, and I saw him at a conference, and he blew my mind with the knowledge and information. Scott Andrews from Scott Andrews Consulting. He's a registered holistic nutritionist with 10 years experience in the health field, and he's also a fitness trainer. So Scott, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thanks, Lucas, for inviting me on the show. I'm pretty excited. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So I saw you last 2 weeks ago at that Recharge conference, and I remember saying, one, I really like this guy. He seems really nice and knowledgeable, but two, you were giving some information that was, in my opinion, just like next level info on nutrition and how it affects your body.
So true. I think we're getting smarter as more and more research comes out, where you're able to read more and stay on all this latest research. There's some awesome stuff out there to help people become better in their lives and better functioning. So hand in hand.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so with that, there was two things that really stood out, but we're going to have this in two sections. So for you watching this at home, this is focused, my channel is based on stress management, and that was the one piece that really stood out with me was foods that increase stress levels. And you know this, you've been there, where you're stressed out and you're reaching for chocolate, you're reaching for that quick fix, you're reaching for the coffee, and there's evidence that Scott, he made a bunch of suggestions, and I've implemented them, and I've noticed that cravings went down, that I have more energy, and that's why we brought Scott out here to share with you really how you can eat to reduce stress. So we'll start off with, I just wanted to ask Scott, what is the role of food in stress management? Like, how does that play in?
Yeah, no, great question, and I truly believe this 100% is that nutrition and exercise can treat and control whether it's mood disorders, stress, and anxiety, like hands down, big part. I mean, I see that every day with my clients, and it's something that people will work through, not just one day, but from years to come. I don't really expect massive changes in day one, but I do expect things to change slowly, and I say the word momentum, and it's starting really tiny day, maybe just adding in one really healthy food, and then from 1 week or 2 weeks, you notice a huge change in your diet. It's amazing things that happen. But start very small. That's my biggest tip.
Okay, absolutely. So start small. Like I said, and that's something I echo with a lot of my clients. I'm like, look, it's a day at a time. And they're the biggest frustration, and what I feel holds people with stress and anxiety back is they're going, I want to go back to where I was, 10 years ago, where I'm so ready to get past this. And I'm like, look, that's possible, but it starts with taking this first step. Like, don't psych yourself out.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big part too. And it's funny talking about like people that eat for stress is that if you try to figure out what comes first, that you eat the wrong types of foods and then you become stressed, or are you stressed and then you eat the wrong type? So we're looking at the same theory about egg before the chicken kind of concept.
Sure.
So it comes hand in hand. And I do truly believe that when people start to eat better, that stress kind of dissipates, or you can manage a bit better. But it all does start massive diet, because diet is 24/7. It's massive. It's everywhere we go, we get trigger foods. We want to eat certain foods, or we don't want them. So it's a big part.
See, and that's why I'm so intrigued. One of my good friends, he's a trainer, he has a gym, and he always says to me, he's like, look, you come in, I can guarantee you 2 of 3 things that are needed for you to succeed. One, I can guarantee that you will receive top techniques and a great workout when you're here. 2, I can guarantee that I'll support you in the process and what you need, give you the strategies, and when you're in, I'll give you that encouragement. But the third most important component, which I have no control over, is what you eat. Right?
It's definitely huge. And I mean, to speak more about that too, and people have the hardest time is with carbohydrates.
Okay.
We talk about caffeine and sugars, and they actually all boil down to a lot of carbohydrate intake. And I get how tough it is for some people. I mean, I was there 10 years ago.
Okay.
I was like wit's end. I'm like, I'm getting sick and I'm getting fatter. I'm like, what can I do? And I started to become a registered nutritionist, and I changed totally the way that I eat and all my friends eat. And it's really something to look at, is that carbs are so addictive to the body. We almost like purposely go and search those out. And the reason behind that, we have these certain things called opiate receptors that are found in our gut.
Okay.
So when I eat something sweet like a croissant or a bagel, that sugar load hits my gut and tells my brain to release endorphins. And normally that only happens when we have drugs or we have sex or we actually play music, that's all this great feeling that happens. So we get that when we have carbohydrates.
Wow.
And then the body releases things called dopamine. It says, hey, that was awesome, so do that again.
Right.
So again, you've got this vicious cycle of you always craving sugars in any form.
Wow. So I see that happen so much, and even myself is even when I was really stressed out at my previous job, I noticed that I was reaching for chocolate bars and all these sugars all the time. But specifically, like I have an Italian background, so
oh, even harder.
I'm trying to introduce that to my circle of friends and family, and they're like, "Dude, we're raised on pasta. Don't tell me it's not good." And I'm like, "Well, it does." So could you expand a bit more on this addiction to carbs? So you said we're looking for that release. So are you suggesting that we severely limit or cut out carbs, or how does that play in?
Great question, and to say that is that carbs are like they give us instant gratification. So when I eat something like pastas or breads or cereal, right away that sugar hits the body and boom, instantly I feel great. It also, another thing it does, it releases serotonin, which is another neurotransmitter that also says, hey, that was so tasty. So we get that more from grains. We don't get that much from carbohydrates such as veggies. So eating carrot, you don't get the same feeling as eating Italian foods as breads and pasta. So doing that, I mean, I totally see that people can control the amount that they put in. And this is this whole paradigm shift called the paleo diet.
Okay.
So the paleo approach, the zone diet, those are all hitting exactly that, saying control the sugars, you control the body fat, you control your emotions, you control your muscle mass, all by the carbohydrates you put in your body. So it's a big part.
So what would be some tips or suggestions for anyone that's watching this video that's sitting there going, look, I hear what you're saying, but I love carbs. Like, I need this. Because there's, even myself, when I was training for hockey, it was said, I went on restricting carbs. And I'm like, dude, this is the oil that runs your car. If you don't have this, you're going to have no energy. You're going to die. You won't be able to perform. But you're coming at it a different angle, though.
Yeah, a great point. I mean, the idea is that it's saying that no carbs is, hopefully I'm saying that I'm not eating any carbs.
Sure.
We do need some.
Okay. And
that's this whole idea about the Atkins diet, saying don't eat any carbs at all. Eat bacon, eat grease, eat eggs and butter and everything. That's all great. But we need carbs for a lot of things. Carbs have good B vitamins that also help the brain. It has fiber. It does keep us full. But we want to modulate the amount of carbs we put in. So I'm really suggesting, and as the number one step, is that many people shouldn't have grains at nighttime.
Okay.
They should have greens. That's kind of a really big step. So after 4 p.m.,
okay,
if you can regulate the amount of sugars from complex carbs, that's a huge step in my books.
So complex carbs, what are complex carbs? How do I find them?
Good. Complex carbs are really anything that comes from like flours or grains. So pastas, breads, cereals, even quinoa, even though it's a superfood, even modulating the amount that we eat for those.
Okay.
So ideally we eat more greens like artichoke hearts and squashes and sweet potatoes, asparagus, and those are perfect at night.
Okay.
And maybe we should have those complex like the grains in the afternoon or morning time.
Okay.
So it's almost like carb timing is better idea than carb limiting is the idea.
Awesome, Scott. So I love this. And what I'm going to have you do at the end is just outline like your ideal schedule, because you mentioned carb timing. I'm sure there's diet timing. So at the end, we're going to go through is like what's a basic framework where you can apply this to lower stress, increase energy, which is what everyone wants. But before that, I want to tie in because you touched on it. So 10 years ago, I want to know a bit more about your story and what got you in here.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to see where I've come now, but 10 years ago, I was actually working at McDonald's as a manager there. So I can't even explain to you the foods that I ate. I'm pretty embarrassed about it, but I was like many other Canadians, like addicted to food. And that's a strong word to use.
Yeah.
We say we addicted to drugs, but we are addicted to food. And I was addicted to my poison that was making me sicker and fatter.
Okay.
And every day I craved them. And so I suddenly say, you know what? I got to take my health in my own hands. And it made a massive change. And I did. I started really small. It did help me leaving McDonald's, but
sure.
I did change in saying, you know what? I'm going to add greens in the morning. And I did was added a powdered greens.
Okay.
First thing when I woke up, which is very alkalizing, very mineral assimilating, that the body's needing it. And that started me into this cascade of health things that I came up with.
Right.
It's a really big start for many people.
So that's something I've been doing, and typically I start off my day with oatmeal, and I throw powdered, veggie greens or whatever in there, throw in some chia seeds and some almonds and almond milk, and then that's just like my morning starter. But then even at your conference, though, was saying only eat this type of food if you're going to work out that day.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather see you do greens first in the morning on an empty stomach, and then choose higher fat and higher protein breakfasts and limiting the carbohydrates. A well-known doctor named Dr. Callum was showing that a high-fat, high-protein diet increases satiety hormones in the body, but it didn't do that when you had carbohydrates. So that means that if I eat high-fat protein in the morning, I'm not going to have sugar binges and not going to have crashes. I'll elevate my mood versus depressing my mood with those right types of foods.
Wow.
So let me give you an example of a breakfast would be having eggs, some fermented things like kimchi and veggies, or having full-fat yogurt with some berries and chia seeds,
okay,
or eating even chicken sausages that are nitrate-free with applesauce and nuts. That's perfect breakfast in my mind.
And do you offer a guide or something that would outline your perfect foods, like perfect breakfast, perfect lunch, or do you have a book or something that links to that?
I'm in the midst of making my own ebook, but right now I do, for those that are needing some more help, is looking at even paleo foods. They give us a good direction for it too. That in my mind is a good starting base for some.
And so is there a website where people can find this that you have?
They don't. I mean, if they want to look at it, it's called paleosolutions.com. His name's Rob Wolf. He's kind of one of the other inventors of the paleo diet. Okay. It's a great, easy approach to eating more protein and fat and less carbohydrates. So great start.
Awesome. That sounds great. So you went from working at McDonald's and getting fatter, even when I was working in finance, I noticed that it was a turning point in my life because I was going and I started drinking coffee. I'd never had coffee before in my life, but then next thing I know, I was doing like 4 cups of coffee, of instant drip coffee a day, loading up the sugar, loading up the cream, chocolate bars, and it was like spike and crash all day. And the turning point, I remember I took a photo of, I was doing something stupid at work, and it was funny, and someone took a photo of it, and I'm like, yeah, and I emailed it to my sister, and I looked at it, I'm like, holy shit, I'm like, this, like, look at this guy's gut. And I said, I put it out to my family, I'm like, I told my sister, I'm like, hey, she's like, well, I'm like, what? She's like, you have put on some weight. I'm like, what? This is what I look, in my mind, I didn't look like that.
No, you probably still felt like your early 20s and late teens, like in your mind, but weight slowly creeps up to us. And to expand on what happened in your body, we have a thing called visceral fat.
Okay.
And that actually is shown in direct relation with high insulin levels, which is precursor to high sugars, as well as high elevated cortisol levels. So 2 big things that will actually cause a weight gain. And for men, right around that waistline, women have a different type of fat called subcutaneous, but it still happens the same way.
So
it's scary.
Okay, so where does the female typically pack on this weight, as you mentioned?
Well, any female can agree with me. It's usually around the waist and thighs and midsection. That's where they hold a lot of their weight.
Okay.
Where guys usually have more internal fat that has that kind of pregnancy appearance, that kind of bigger gut.
The bigger gut.
But women have this soft fat that kind of goes around all the kind of the muscle and around the skin.
And neither of this fat is healthy.
Actually, fortunately, the subcutaneous female fat is on. If there's one healthier, that's the stuff that can be burned off, that controls. But men, it's a dangerous fat, the visceral, and that has to be all controlled through diet. So for a male, they have to totally look at nutritionally, where females can use exercise to help with that.
That is exactly why I reached out to you and had you do this, because that's what I wanted to know, and I'm sure everyone watching this, that's what they want to know too, is that so men really have to focus on their diet, whereas women just have to focus on increasing their exercise levels.
Exactly. Exercise, specifically that called anaerobic or power exercises. So unfortunately, running for 90 minutes, I mean, it might sound great, but in my books, that can actually elevate cortisol and actually store more fat.
Yes.
So it's opposite what they're trying to do. So they're needing to doing is adding more strength training and more power and sprint work in their programming, and that will actually help burn off all the fat around that muscle tissue aka subcutaneous fat.
Oh.
Men can do that, which helps, but they have to totally look at their diet, because diet will control their insulin levels, and that will actually dictate how much fat internally that they have.
Fascinating. I love this stuff. This is so. I've actually heard about that the cardio, because it actually elevates your cortisol levels and insulin and all that stuff, and it's like it's counterproductive. It can be.
Exactly, and then even to make it worse is that we have all these hormones that are called sex hormones.
Right.
That's estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone that builds muscle mass. But the body will convert that hormone into cortisol, and that's what's happening. So ideally, you want to add muscle mass, but it's like, no, you're doing too much aerobic training. We're converting that sex hormones from muscle into cortisol. So it's like, wait a minute, it's counterproductive, just like exactly said.
Wow.
So
Okay.
the right training will help to go so far as better health.
Okay. So Scott, let me just I want to know quickly then from you. We'll do men and women. But for a man, if I'm watching this, I'm a guy, and I want to make changes in my, like, what do I have to do to reduce stress and reduce some of this fat?
And I think stress comprehends into fat. If you're overweight, you're probably in a lower mood. I mean, they do go hand in hand. I mean, it's hard to see some vibrant, healthy-looking person and having bad mood. I mean,
Sure.
It's hand in hand too. So when we can take care of whether it's our mood or weight gain, they are symbiotic in nature, those two. So if a male's watching this, I mean, the biggest number one thing is portion control. I mean, we love to eat large, big amounts of foods at once.
Okay.
If you can limit that goes a very far way.
Okay.
So limiting portion control. Second one would be increasing my greens. And like we said in the first video, is actually adding more greens in the morning.
Right.
Because I have to say it, men have very bland diets. It's like chicken wings and beer, or
Right.
pasta and sausages. It's very bland in my mind. So adding more greens is what the body is like crying for. That's a huge part.
And so adding greens, okay, that could be either simulated, the powder stuff, or real greens, spinach, stuff like that.
If they can juice it, get a nice powered blender, juice greens such as kale or kohlrabi or Swiss chard. Those are great greens.
Okay.
That's for very advanced people. But if you're new to eating well, I suggest starting with the powdered greens. It goes very far. Throw out those multivitamins. Only choose greens. That is a way better multivitamin in my mind than the one-a-day vitamins.
One a day that ends up going in your urine. It's funny. I take those things and my urine turns radioactive. I'm like,
Yep.
I don't think a lot of this is really staying inside me. Like something's changed here.
It's very expensive on your wallet, and your body is like, I don't know how to digest this stuff. I'll just either pee or poop it out.
Okay.
So don't waste your money on that garbage.
Okay, so for men, the keys were portion control, adding greens, and
if they can do one thing is limiting the amount of carbohydrates and replacing grains with greens. That analogy is really good for men,
especially
if they can do it. But portion first, greens second, and then looking at the carbohydrate intake. But
awesome. And now, Scott, for females, so the ladies out there that are watching this, they want to reduce stress, make nutrition changes to feel healthier. What would you suggest for them?
Well, I had to go back to the thing I said before. Number one is exercise related.
Right.
When women do exercise, they choose better foods. So unfortunately, that does come first. And again, using the right time. So it's not about the quantity of exercise; it's the quality. So shorter duration, higher intensity will far outperform long duration stuff. So I had to get that off my chest to make sure they understand that.
Right.
It's very important. Second is that many females undereat. They actually don't eat enough of the right types, so they don't eat enough protein and they don't eat enough fat. So they got to make sure they choose higher fat, higher protein foods. So that's simple. Adding an egg for a snack, using full fat yogurt, addition to fruits. Also adding in free range grass fed beef or chicken for dinner. That's a big part. But many of them skip those and only eat carbohydrates. That's the problem.
See, and it's funny because I understand this. Logically speaking, I'm at the supermarket. I want to lose fat. Why would I buy full fat when it says fat free? It's like
exactly, and that's the problem is that when they choose low fat foods, they're adding something in there to trick your body. So And I said before, it's basically called a chemical shitstorm.
Okay.
Because there's so many additives in that will confuse the brain and actually make you crave more carbohydrates. So when you have 0 calories, the body's like, wait a minute, that was sweet. I digest the food and say, you tricked me. Now go eat more sugars. And that's the big issue when we choose 0-calorie foods.
Wow. So avoid the 0 calorie. 0 calorie means 0 bite. Avoid it at all costs.
That, and then the second point is that if you're choosing 0% fat, the body needs fat to assimilate that calcium in the yogurt. So if you're thinking, great, I get calcium in yogurt, and I choose 0 fat, your body's like, well, I can't put that anywhere. I can't absorb that calcium, so we need fat to do and absorb calcium. So make sure it's full fat and good sources on those.
Excellent. So this has been excellent because actually, if I recall, you do supermarket tours. Is that not correct?
Yeah, we usually do them at the end of the month. We choose some different destinations, but most of them are down on the Safeway on Robson and Denman Street.
I mean, I think that's awesome that you offer this as a service because a lot of people, they're not sure what to buy, and you're going to go in and show them exactly what to get and read labels.
We do, and to take it to one step further, is that I think that all of us should be eating different based on our body type. So I talked about gender, but we have a genetic difference as well. So we have 2 types of people, one called a fast oxidative and one called a slow oxidative. So the fast oxidative actually should be eating more protein and fat, where the slow have to really focus on the carbohydrate quality. So in my tour, I separate 2 groups, and they choose food based on their metabolic or nutritional oxidative type.
Okay, so if I'm watching this right now on YouTube and I'm thinking, which side am I on? Because I don't know which one I am. What characteristics? How would I self-select? How would I identify?
It's usually the people that get low energy drive, saying, you know what, I can't go more than 4 hours without eating, or I almost get so hungry I get angry.
That's me.
That's saying that you are a fast oxidative type. And when you choose too much carbs, you'll get a dull in your blood sugar, and that's where you get those crashes. So you have to choose more fat and protein to keep you fuller longer.
Okay.
Whereas a slow saying, you know what, I can go all day without eating, it doesn't really bug me too much, then that's considered a slow oxidative type. And carbs are the quality focus on that one.
So like the complex carbs, like the sweet potatoes that you spoke about, these types of things.
Exactly. And there is free online tests you can do. Just type in nutritional typing tests.
Okay.
And it's there free. It's about 20 questions, and they'll dial it in even more than I just asked.
Wow. Okay, so then just to wrap this up for people watching at home, how do I start my day? Like what are Scott Andrews' tips for doing this? And I do want to qualify too. I'm going to put your email. So if you want to email Scott, it's in the description. And if you have any questions, just ask in the question box below, because then Scott will be able to respond to it. But right now, what is a way that I can structure my day to have peak performance, reduce my stress, and feel alive?
Great. Well, and the first one going back to saying eating for metabolic type, that goes hand in hand. I mean, I've helped thousands of people through that kind of programming. So they eat their type, great things will happen. The mood will be elevated. They'll start seeing that whole fat and muscle shift, which is a good thing you want to. And you'll feel very balanced through the whole day. You'll have better thought, better cognitive function when you eat the way you should be. So that's a step 1. Step 2 is adding in more high quality dense food. Many Canadians, we eat very calorically dense food, but not nutritionally dense food. So that's skipping anything that's in a box and choosing whole foods.
Okay.
It's a big step.
So,
go
on.
And the third would be basically trying to limit, and I'm not saying cut out, but limiting the amount of caffeinated beverages. It's a big step. Or choosing better sources. So I mentioned matcha green tea or white green tea. Those are better teas to drink, especially if you're caffeine sensitive.
Okay.
So reducing those part 2. And then the last part is trying to add more high foods in tryptophan. And that's another thing that we get that elevates our mood. So tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin in a good way. The number 1 food that's high in tryptophan is kidneys from sea lions, but unfortunately we can't eat those foods. So our next on the list is actually sea vegetables. So anything that's basically comes from the sea is good. So that things that people get from sushi, that green wrap, that's great. That's called nori. It's a great start. Also, things like fish, eggs, or chicken, which is also protein rich, which helps balance blood sugar.
Okay.
Also, nuts like sesame. It's a great addition too, and that makes a perfect snack. So take sesame or Brazil or almond nuts, add it in with some crunchy vegetables. That's a perfect snack combination.
All right, add vegetables.
And then last thing is dairy. So full fat dairy. We're coming right back again full circle. Make sure it's full fat, and that's again high in tryptophan and high in protein.
So for breakfast, then you're saying, what's a good start then? You're saying eggs and spinach. Would that be a good start?
That'd be great too. And if you're saying, you know what, Scott, I really love my carbs, maybe just choosing one slice of ideally gluten-free bread with a little bit of almond butter with your eggs, that's perfect. But if you're choosing a big bowl of cereal, you started yourself off with a spiraling effect of blood sugar. So avoiding the cereal and only maybe adding one slice of toast with your eggs. That's a way better start your morning.
So that's a good morning. What about lunch?
Lunch, again, we're okay. If you do want to include grains, I would suggest one handful for females of grains, 2 for males. So 2 scoops of grains, which is quinoas or brown rice, basmati rice. That's okay. If you are doing whole wheat pasta, if you're Italian, make sure it's only in the afternoon, not for evening.
Okay. And then for dinner, ideal would be?
So again, the whole idea of replacing grains with greens at approach, or moving any grains in that too. So things like sweet potatoes, squash, asparagus amongst your proteins. So that would be your fish, your chicken, your eggs, or if you're vegetarian, tempeh is a great alternative.
Awesome. So yeah, I just want to thank you so much for that. And if you put these tips into practice, you will notice a significant reduction in stress and increase in energy and vitality, correct?
That is perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for being and sharing this awesome knowledge. And like I said, if anyone has any questions for Scott, his email address is in the description, or just comment below, and he will get back to you. All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Lucas.
My pleasure.